Story 1. As someone who has lived, worked, and spent considerable time in nearly a dozen countries across Europe and North America, this is an impossible question to answer because, 1. Inflation is a global phenomenon. Working-class people are feeling the squeeze everywhere. This has immense psychological effects on the working class, no matter where you are. It's impossible for a country to be doing great by every measure. For example, the Nordic countries are in the top 5 in virtually all development indices, and their governments function very well. However, the culture in these places has caused several different types of less measurable social problems, such as less social cohesion, declining birth rates, and a considerable increase in depression among young people compared to prior generations. What is doing great by your standards? Great economically, great socially, great at everything? Again, of the nearly dozen countries I have spent considerable time in, there was not a single one that I would say is doing great. The world is in a difficult state right now, especially if you are working class. Story 2. Biased Australian here, but we have an overall good economy, not a bad healthcare system, and good quality of life. It's not perfect, but I wouldn't live anywhere else. Story 3. The Baltics. Estonia is especially remarkable, but Lithuania and Latvia do great as well. Talking about Estonia, it is probably the world's most advanced nation in terms of digitalization. Despite its tiny population, it has solid public transport, especially the rail sector, which has made huge progress. Rail Baltica will provide even more benefits. Besides that, the country is very well organized. Infrastructure has been upgraded and modernized massively. The country has a solid tourism sector and a booming digital industry. The country is safe and running rather smoothly. Similar things can be said about Lithuania and Latvia as well. Of course, the developments are not identical, but the tendency is similar. And again, Rail Baltica promises a massive benefit to all 3 countries. Sure, each country has its flaws. Inflation, energy independence, and housing are also affecting the Baltics. Especially the last point is critical to me. The major cities, mainly Tallinn, Riga, and Vilnius, are already somehow having problems with housing prices. This is mainly due to gentrification and orientation toward touristic use. In my opinion, this might be one of the crucial aspects they have to take care of in order to avoid Lisbonization. To be honest, I believe that the only major aspect potentially disrupting things in the Baltics is Russia. Hopefully, the protection of the European Union and North Atlantic Treaty Organization membership will last and be sufficient to avoid any further Russian interventions. Story 4. Democracy is falling globally as billionaires and their own politicians dictate policy. People are overworked, underpaid, and exhausted. I do not think the species is faring well on any front at this point, and things are looking bleaker no matter where you live. Story 5. Andorra. The United States mistook it for a war-torn African nation and sent millions to it. After realizing that Andorra was a well-off European country, the United States asked for the money back. Andorra had already spent the money to renovate their ski chalets and refused. Story 6. My experience in Singapore. A cross between the United Kingdom, Switzerland, China, and Hawaii with none of the imperfections of those places. Everyone was happy, polite, and contributing to society, and everything worked. And it was gorgeous. Story 7. Today, France was doing excellent. At long last, the cancerous parasite Jean-Marie Le Pen died. It was truly a moment of joy for anyone who opposes Nazis, racists, anti-Semitic individuals, homophobia, sexism, and all forms of discrimination. Sadly, with the help of the wealthy, the harmful influence spread. The individual died much too late, and the French far-right, originally funded by actual Nazis and whose current politicians resemble them, poses a risk of seizing power. So, tomorrow will be another difficult day in a country that can't stop deteriorating, thanks to the wealthy, the fascists, and all those who defend them. But today was a good day. Story 8. From an international point of view, my home country, the Czech Republic, is quite good, I'd say. It's in the top 10 safest countries in the world, has universal healthcare, not perfect, but you don't have to go broke for having treatable illnesses. Free universities, freedom of speech, you can say basically whatever you want. Freedom of religion and separation of the church and the state, clean and safe public transport, and a functioning social system. The country is not afraid to stand up and help struggling nations. The people, even though they look mean on the streets, are able to join together and help others in need very quickly. We still have to improve in a lot of areas like digitalization, fighting corruption and bureaucracy, and LGBTQ rights. 60% of people are pro-same-sex marriage, including some religious organizations, but the law is stuck in the Chamber of Deputies because of a group of men preaching traditional values while being on their third marriage, or supporting young people who want to start a business or a family. We should invest in fighting fake news and Russian influence so we don't end up like some of our European Union colleagues. Last but not least, we have good beer and a rich culture and history. Story 9. I am an American Australian living in Croatia, and I love it here. The cost of living is a little high for local wages, but it is one of the safest countries in the world. Zagreb is like number 1 or 2 safest cities in Europe for women. Story 10. This will be a thread where, whenever anyone names a country, 2 to 4 people from that country will shout them down with evidence of the sky falling. Canada is actually doing great right now. Story 11. Ireland is one of the richest, most developed, and peaceful countries on Earth, having the 5th highest gross domestic product per capita, 2nd highest gross domestic product purchasing power parity per capita, and the 5th highest human development index rank. The country also has the highest quality of life in the world, ranking first in the Economist Intelligence Unit's Quality of Life Index. Ireland was ranked 4th on the Global Peace Index. Ireland also has high rankings for its education system, political freedom and civil rights, press freedom and economic freedom. It was also ranked 4th from the bottom on the Failed States Index, being one of the few sustainable states in the world. Story 12. I live in the United States. By all measures, I'm below average with my income around $50,000. I'm in a rural area in the Southeast. I hate the political landscape of the country. I don't like the immigration issues. Most of the stuff I read is depressing, but luckily, where I live, I'm pretty isolated from all of it. My personal problems are mostly things I brought on myself, and I have had an opportunity to improve them and my lifestyle. I'm pretty happy overall. I can't say that as a whole that the United States is good, let alone great right now, but it could be worse. Solid 6 out of 10. Story 13. World's best economists said it would take a decade to bring Argentina back. Milei took it from red to black in less than a year for the first time in about 200 years, and in a couple of months they may go green. Socialists and communists are very upset. The world is watching. The West is watching. Story 14. Not quite a country, but the people who run the United States are doing very well right now. I'm talking about the billionaire class. Their wealth has increased immensely in a short amount of time, and United States voters just decided to vote against their own interests in favor of what is best for the ultra-wealthy. Trump will make deeper tax cuts for the ultra-wealthy. With Trump and the Republican Party now taking full power of the government, they can do further pillaging of additional value and resources. Dissenters will be shot in the street in Manhattan. There's never been a better time to be an American billionaire. Story 15. Right now, China. In the future, it depends. Momentum from past borrowing and debt still lingers. Best in manufacturing. A close second in artificial intelligence technology. Convenient in daily living. For the average person looking to live a simple life, it's great. But if you want to climb the social ladder and do life-changing things, then there might be better options elsewhere. Story 16. From the Brisbane Times, January 8, 2025. Think the whole world's going to hell in a handbasket? You're wrong, and here's why. Matt Wade. It might come as a surprise given the violence and political turmoil that has dominated the news, but 2025 is shaping as a pretty good year for the world's average person. That's not to downplay the significance of the conflicts playing out across the globe. Peacefulness worldwide has declined for the past 5 years, according to an index prepared by the Institute for Economics and Peace. The wars in Gaza and Ukraine are just 2 of 56 active conflicts identified by the Institute. That's the most since the end of the Second World War. A United Nations preview of likely humanitarian needs this year described the world as being on fire and warned more than 300 million people will require emergency assistance in the months ahead. And yet, A raft of measures ranging from longevity to literacy suggests humanity is in better shape than ever. After a brief dip during the pandemic, lifespans are improving. Global life expectancy is at an all-time high of 73.3 years despite the prevalence of deadly conflict. That's almost 7 years longer than in 2000. Australia does especially well on that count. Figures published by the Australian Bureau of Statistics in November show we have the world's fourth longest life expectancy at 83.2 years. The world has also never been better able to care for its newborns. The share of children dying before reaching the age of 5 has halved since 2000 and continues to fall. The World Bank says global poverty reduction has resumed after the disruption of the COVID-19 pandemic. At the turn of this century, 30% of the world's population survived on less than $2.15 per person per day in 2011 prices, the global measure of extreme poverty, but that fell to an all-time low of 8.5% last year. The overall number living in extreme poverty has also fallen sharply. Data published by Our World in Data shows that in 1990 there were almost 2 billion people living on less than $2.15 a day. But by last year that number was down to 693 million. The list of improvements goes on. Medical advances are saving and enhancing millions of lives. The global literacy rate is at a record high and a long-standing gender literacy gap between young men and women is now negligible. The share of households with access to electricity is at a record 91%, underpinning widespread internet use and allowing greater economic participation. Meanwhile, the carbon dioxide emissions that contribute to global warming have plateaued on a per capita basis. While faster progress to reduce greenhouse gases is needed, that's a positive milestone in the effort to tackle climate change. Dr. Charles Kenny, an expert in international development at the Washington-based Center for Global Development, says 2025 is shaping as at least one of the best years to be alive for the average human. There's a good possibility of it being the year with the lowest chance of dying in history, the best chance of surviving childhood, the best chance of getting educated, the best chance of avoiding extreme poverty, and the best chance of having access to electricity, he told me. But likely not the lowest chance of dying in war or the chance of living in a liberal democracy. The improvement in so many global well-being indicators has happened despite the growing prevalence of violent conflict and the hundreds of millions of people requiring humanitarian assistance. Oxford University professor Max Roser, who founded the Our World in Data project, sums up the complexity this way. The world is awful. The world is much better. The world can be much better. All three statements are true at the same time. The flow of negative world news tends to overshadow stories of gradual progress. Opinion polls show most people in countries like Australia believe the world is much more poverty-stricken, sickly, and desperate than it actually is. Take extreme poverty, for example. The rapid decline in poverty rates during the past 3 decades has improved the lives of hundreds of millions and transformed the global economy. But research shows many people are oblivious to that momentous, world-changing trend. A large global survey by the Swedish foundation, Gapminder, asked what proportion of the world's population live in extreme poverty with 3 possible answers: around 10%, around 30%, and around 50%. The correct answer is around 10%, but only 1 in 10 respondents got it right. Around a third believed extreme poverty had increased in recent decades when the opposite is true. People are more negative about places that are far away, places which they know less from their own experience and more through the media. But that level of public misperception is dangerous. The failure to recognize historic improvements, such as the decline in global poverty, feeds into a general pessimism about the possibility of change. Why bother if the world is doomed? If we only see the problems and only hear what is going wrong, we have no hope that the future can be better, writes Roser. The unfounded pessimism about global progress may encourage more isolationist policies and limit cooperation and investment in global public goods like public health, emissions reduction, and climate change mitigation that will improve everyone's well-being and life chances. Global cooperation is more important to continued progress than ever, says Kenny. More tragedy and turmoil are inevitable in 2025, but even so, for millions and millions of people around the globe, things are getting measurably better. Matt Wade is a senior economics writer at the Sydney Morning Herald. Story 17. I believe Greece is currently laughing its ass off at Germany. The economy is in cycles, bursts, and booms. That is so concerning about the American economy right now. Story 18. Ireland's doing all right. Budget surplus, raised the minimum wage, every government department has cash. Still the darling of the technology sector. It rains a lot though, but you can earn big money in Ireland. Story 19. France is actually doing pretty well right now. It has the best demographics in Europe, a relatively strong economy, and is well positioned to become the leading country in Europe, with Germany sliding toward an economic and demographic spiral.